Okay, so why is documenting hoof balance important and how can we do it? So obviously today I'm going to be talking to you about HoofmApp, how to use HoofmApp, why I created it, those kind of things. And today we're going to be focusing on the dorsopalmar balance. So we're going to be focusing on the lateral view. So how to use HoofmApp in the lateral view. We will touch on some of the other views as well, because obviously you can use HoofmApp from a lateral view, from a solar view, and from a DP view. Um, but today we're going to focus on a lateral view. Okay, so why is documenting hoof balance important and how can we do it? Right, so why is hoof balance important? Well, hoof balance and specific parameters of hoof balance have been shown to be linked to lameness. So Dyson 2011 used digital photography to assess the external reference points of the hoof and found that there was a significant difference in the heel to toe height ratios between groups of non-lame and lame horses and between the lamer and less lame limbs of bilaterally lame horses. What does that mean? So if we look at this image here, we can see this is the toe height here. So the height of the toe from the hairline to the bottom to the solar surface, and then the height of the heel is from the hairline to the ground at the heel. And the ratio between this height, the heel height and the toe height, is directly linked to lameness. So the more heel heights there are to toe heights, the more likely your horse is to be lame. So so we can see straight away that there is a link between hoof proportions and lameness, and so therefore it's important to document it and to monitor that. And as we go through, we'll look at lots of other different proportions that are important, other different measurements that are relevant to what we want to document. And the most important thing at this point is to say that digital photos can provide balance assessment akin to X-rays if the lateral photos are taken focused on the bottom edge of the hoof or shoe, as you would with an X-ray. And that's from White et al. And that's obviously the protocol, therefore, that Dyson 2011 used to make these external assessments. So there is a direct link between hoof proportions and lameness. So in order to try and keep our horses from being lame or work out how to treat them if they are lame and it's associated with the foot, then we need to be able to measure and make measurements, etc. And this is because hoof proportions and the hoof proportions, so that heel to toe height ratios, toe angle, heel angle, coronet angle, etc., hoof proportions and the base proportions, so the amount of base of heel support versus the amount of toe, directly affect external hoof pastern axis, internal phalangeal alignment, and leverage forces. Okay, so what am I talking about? So if we look here on the left, we can see that the heel to toe height ratios that we were talking about before directly affects the relationship between the pastern and the hoof. So the higher the amount of heels to toe heights is going to cause a broken back hoof pastern axis. Now, Dyson suggested that there was a 3-to-1 maximum, but in a minute we'll have a look at why that might not be the case, and why it's very much an individual basis. But anyway, the hoof proportions affect digit alignment, so the relationship between the pastern and the hoof. And internally, it affects the alignment of the bones. So as you can see here, the middle phalanx is broken back from the proximal phalanx, and the distal phalanx is broken back from the middle phalanx. What does that mean? So that means, as you can see, that if we draw a line through here, that this angle is broken backwards from this angle, and this angle is broken backwards. So we have a ski slope almost occurring here. Okay, so this is a broken back phalangeal alignment, and this is a broken back hoof pastern axis. So hoof pastern axis is external, phalangeal alignment is internal. With phalangeal alignment, we have 3 points of reference. Okay, we have the proximal phalanx, middle phalanx, distal phalanx. With the external hoof pastern axis, we only have 2 reference points, the angle of the pastern and the angle of the hoof. And the angle of the hoof is obviously parallel with the dorsal wall, but as farriers and stuff, we tend to move it back into the middle to create this line in the middle of the pastern and hoof. Now, the line through the pastern is obviously parallel with the dorsal and palmar surfaces, but we tend to put it in the middle so that we can match them both up. Okay, so hoof proportions directly affect hoof pastern axis and phalangeal alignment, but why does that matter? Well, we know there's been many studies now linking poor phalangeal alignment here, so which would equate to a broken back hoof pastern axis externally, to massively increased strains in the deep digital flexor tendon. We can see the deep digital flexor tendon running down here in this image. So when we have a broken back hoof pastern axis, we increase strain in this tendon. And this tendon, as you can see here, sits directly over this bone here, which is the navicular bone. So all of that increased strain is transferred onto the navicular bone, and also this bursa here, that's in between the bone and the tendon, also this ligament here, this distal impar ligament, and also into the coffin joint itself as well. So if we have poor phalangeal alignment, poor digit alignment, a broken back hoof pastern axis, and a broken back phalangeal alignment, then we're going to have massive increases in strain in the deep digital flexor tendon and the navicular, and predispose our horses to navicular syndrome. But not only that, as with the recent studies of Hagen showing that the tendon strain in the superficial digital flexor tendon follows closely to, or has the same strain pattern as the deep digital flexor tendon when you have a broken hoof pastern axis, shows that if we have a poor phalangeal alignment and a broken back hoof pastern axis, we're also going to massively increase strain in our superficial digital flexor tendon as well. And then the superficial digital flexor tendon is highly prone to injury. So obviously this is another issue, another reason why we want to monitor hoof balance, because we want to stop our horses from getting injured. And hoof balance is directly linked to lameness. Now, not only do we have pathology in the digit itself, so the navicular and the tendons, for instance, we also have arthritic implications in the joints because we have joint spaces being affected. But also any kind of discomfort or lameness in the feet is going to directly affect our horse's back, because we know from studies such as Landman et al. 2004, 74% of horses with back pain are lame, and 32% of horses with lameness have back pain. Now, why is that the case? That's the case because in order for the horse to compensate for any discomfort in the digit created by poor alignment, that horse has to stiffen its spine and use compensatory movements behind or in front, depending on which is lame, in order to cope with that. So then they end up with back problems. And this is not just when horses are overtly lame, but we also have to consider smaller compensations just from different levels of discomfort as well. So again, we have to monitor hoof balance if we want to protect our whole horse. And then in the hind feet, and this is obviously goes into my personal research and my PhD work that I'm doing as well. If we have poor digit alignment behind, then we have links, these historical links to these other pathologies in the hind end. And in my research, I found that poor digit alignment behind, so poor phalangeal alignment, a broken back hoof pastern axis, is directly linked to limb position. So limb orientation is affected by our digit proportions behind. Okay, so if we have broken back hoof pastern axis, then the horse will tend to camp under more. So the amount the horse camps under is directly proportionate to how broken back its hoof pastern axis is. And it's how broken back its hoof pastern axis is directly linked to its hoof proportions, right? So again, we no foot, no horse really starts to become very, very clear. Again, and because we have this change in limb orientation, then we are predisposed to injuries and pathologies up in the higher end of the hind limb, up here in the pelvic region, sacroiliac area, and in the caudal-thoracic region. Now, if you want to understand more about those links, then feel free to watch my other webinars and my articles and read my paper, etc., etc. But the point being that we have to monitor hoof balance because it's going to affect our whole horse. So if we're not doing it, then, are we doing our horses a disservice? And that's a question for you to ask. Now, I could go on for hours and hours and hours about the links between hoof balance and lameness, but it's quite clear that good hoof balance is vital in performance, the longevity of our horses' working life, and their soundness. So with that, how can we monitor this hoof balance? So unfortunately, a lot of the photos that you see on Facebook and a lot of the documenting of shoeing has been all about aesthetics. So if we look on the left here, you can see how this photo's been taken. The photo's been taken, and this is my shoeing. So, I admit I do it sometimes too, but you'll see the point of what I'm saying. This photo is taken to show off the fit, to show off a shiny foot, show off the nail line, but it means nothing. Okay, so we can see that there's a good fit and there's a good nail line, but it doesn't tell us anything about the proportions of the foot. It doesn't tell us about whether that foot is going to be functioning properly. It doesn't tell us whether that horse is going to be biomechanically efficient. It tells us none of that information whatsoever. So photos like this, while it's nice to see people's skill and to see that they've done a nice job and they've taken pride in their work, but it doesn't really tell us anything. So this is why when we start to take photos of our feet, as you can see on the right here, as you would for an X-ray, then all of the balance, you can assess the balance, and all the problems with balance or the good things with the balance start becoming clear, especially obviously when you start marking it up with HoofmApp. So we've got to get into an understanding that the proportions that we've created of the capsule are far more important than how pretty it looks. Now, obviously, this is also my shoeing job on the right, and it's a relatively pretty job, but that's just because I take pride in my work. What's important is the proportions and the measurements that we've created. So let's start to look at what they are. Now, first of all, and I'll ask you guys to put this in the chat for me. Can I just ask you all to stop your video, otherwise you'll be in the top right-hand corner. Everyone, please stop their videos. Right, so I'll ask a question and you can answer it in the chat for me, okay? So, can you, quickly observing, and also imagine that this was 6 weeks later, can you see the difference in these 2 feet? Would you be able to tell me the difference? So some of you saying yes, some of you saying no. So those of you who are saying yes, you're obviously looking very carefully, right? And also, I would guarantee that if you didn't see these 2 feet next to each other, but saw them 6 weeks apart, you might give me a different answer. Would you agree to that? If you saw them 6 weeks apart and didn't see them together on the same day, would you still be able to tell the difference? Okay, not too sure. Right. Well, The point being is that even if you can see a difference, why don't you guys tell me what difference can you see? Anyone who says they can see a difference, tell me what you can see. Anybody going to be brave enough? Right. Okay. So some of you are saying sole depth. That is, you can't tell anything about sole depth from here. One of you saying the dorsal hoof wall is longer. Now that's interesting because they're exactly the same length. Well, I know that because I created these drawings. The hoof walls are exactly the same length. Now, one person is almost there. So, AJ Erickson, you are correct. The hoof on the right has a 5 degree. Its heel is 5 degrees, and its dorsal wall is just 5 degrees different from the one on the left. Okay, so this is 5 degrees. All right. Now, so well done if you did spot that. But the truth is, and I'll just be honest with you, the truth is, if these feet weren't next to each other like this, you would not be able to tell 6 weeks later that that hoof was 5 degrees different. You wouldn't. I'm pretty sure you wouldn't. If you would, I'll take my hat off to you. But the point is well, let's look at the next pair. Can you see the difference between these two? Again, imagining that you're looking 6 weeks later, not, imagining, you're seeing these feet 6 weeks later when you come back to shoot a horse, or even 4 weeks later. Can you tell the difference between these two? Hardly. Right. No. Okay, so everyone's saying no. Right. So we managed to see the first one, but not so clear on the second one. Okay. Now, what if I do this? Watch. Now, can we see what I'm getting at? So, these are the changes that happen to the foot, cycle after cycle after cycle after cycle after cycle. Okay. Now, the problem is, right? The problem is that because you can't see the difference, yeah, crap farrier, right. Well, that's unfortunately not always the case. It can just be a result of peripheral fit shoes. So we can't always blame the farrier. But the point here is that you wouldn't tell the difference, or the farrier wouldn't tell the difference between cycles of these feet. So that means that by the time we got to here and somebody did notice that we had a long toe, low heel, it's already too late. The foot's already collapsed. But if you had documented and measured the feet at this stage, you could see that we're already starting to go backwards. Is everyone with me? So this shows the importance of documenting the feet accurately, so that you can see changes in the heel angle, dorsal wall angle at a much earlier stage and intervene quicker before we get to this stage where we're already in a pathological situation and already causing a lot of damage to soft tissue. So you all with me? Okay. So just hopefully that's proven a point. So that's why I created HoofmApp, because I get asked to go and see horses all the time for second opinion. And exactly this is what's happened. We've got to this stage, and then what happens is the feet get blamed for being crap, or the farrier gets blamed for being crap. But so I realized the absolute necessity for everybody to be able to monitor those changes, not just the farrier, but the owner. and also, therefore, to be able to communicate between each other to make sure that we're all on the same page. So that's why I created HoofmApp. All right, so let's look at HoofmApp and what it does, how we use it, etc., etc. Now, we have established ideals through different research, and they're generally widely accepted in the farriery industry, although there is a lot of debate. But in terms, everyone pretty much agrees that to create biomechanical efficiency and to look after the soft tissue structures, these are some of the parameters that we want to be looking at. Okay. So we want to have a straight hoof pastern axis, or a relatively straight hoof pastern axis, something that's, within a few degrees. Okay. And then we want to have the base of our shoe being fitted around the center of rotation. Now, the center of rotation is the middle of the distal condyle of the middle phalanx, right? So that's, you can't see that, but we have a method of knowing where that is externally, and I'll show you that in a minute. And then we have the studies such as Dyson 2011, O'Grady and Poupard 2003 that talk about the heel to toe angle difference and how that should be within 5 degrees, right? And as we saw before, it's very difficult to actually see 5 degrees, isn't it? So that's something that we would need to measure. Now, I've got a slide in a minute to show you that 5 degrees is not always the case, but nevertheless, it's something that we want to look at and monitor. And obviously, therefore, the other really important measurement is, again, this heel to toe height ratio, which was clearly shown by the Dyson study to be very much linked with lameness. Okay, so these are the proportions that we're looking at because they've been shown by research to be relevant to biomechanics of the hoof. Okay. Now, here, if we look at this heel to toe height ratio and also angle differences, so as I said, Dyson suggested 3:1 as an absolute maximum for heel to toe height ratio. I would agree with that. However, 3:1 would still be too high for some horses. And then studies also talked about a maximum of 5 degree difference between the toe and the heel. And I found that is not quite the case. Now, the reason I put these 3 feet here is because I think we can all agree that they've got a relatively straight hoof pastern axis, right? They're 3 different types of horses. So if you tell me thoroughbred have got crap feet, well, take the shoes off and see what happens, or shoe them with support and packing and tell me that's still the case as the feet develop. But anyway, the point here being we have 3 different breeds, all with relatively straight hoof pastern axes. We can agree on that. If we start to look at their heel to toe height ratios, we can see this chap, in order to create a straight hoof pastern axis, has a just under 3:1 heel heights to one toe height, right? This guy, this warm blood here, has a just over 2:1 heel to toe height ratio in order to have a straight hoof pastern axis, right? And the thoroughbred is in a similar position, just over 2 heel heights to 1 toe height in order to create a straight hoof pastern axis, right? So the ideal heel to toe height ratio for any individual horse is whatever heel to toe height ratio creates a near straight hoof pastern axis, and it's individual to the horse. Now, I've never seen a horse with a greater than 3:1 heel to toe height ratio with a straight hoof pastern axis. So that's why I agree with Dyson, where she says that being a maximum. But for some horses, like this warm blood, if this warm blood had a 3:1 heel to toe height ratio, it'd have a very broken back hoof pastern axis. Okay. So the ideal for each foot is what creates alignment, but therefore it becomes a very good thing to monitor, doesn't it? Because if we have a horse that has a straight hoof pastern axis with us just over 2:1 heel to toe height ratios, if we measure it this time at 2:1, and we come back next time and it's 2.5:1, we're starting to go the wrong way here. We're starting to lose our heel to toe height ratios, right? So that's where it becomes an important number to start monitoring. Right, now let's look at the heel to toe angles. So here This guy's got a 50-degree toe angle and a 45-degree heel angle, right? That's quite nice. So that's within 5 degrees, isn't it? So that would go along with the other studies. But this horse, as you can see, it's got a nice straight hoof pastern axis. It's got a nice hoof, but it's actually got a 57-degree dorsal wall and a 50-degree heel angle, right? So he's actually got a 7-degree difference, but he still has a nice straight hoof pastern axis, right? And this guy, this thoroughbred is similar. He's got a 7-degree difference in heel to toe height ratio. So again, heel to toe angle measurements is not something that has to be an exact amount. It doesn't have to be within 5 degrees. I think that I've seen some horses up to 10 degrees difference that can still maintain a straight hoof pastern axis and the heel to toe height ratios. But the point is that, again, it's a measurement that we use for documenting to make sure that we're maintaining our proportions and we're not moving the wrong way before it becomes obviously different. And at that point, we've already lost a lot of time and a lot of hoof balance, okay? Now, the same thing goes for palmar or plantar angles, okay? So a lot of the time people will say, oh, horses should have a 5-degree plantar angle or 2-degree, 3-degree, whatever. Again, this is very, very individual to the horse, okay? Now, this is true also because horses have different bone angles, okay? So if you take this bone here, that bone has an angle to it, okay? So how thick it is, essentially, okay? Or how narrow it is, how wide it is. Now, bone angle plus the plantar angle equals the angle of the hoof, right? And as we've said, we want to have a straight hoof pastern axis externally, but also we want to have a reasonably straight phalangeal alignment internally, right? Now, that's up for some debate in terms of the hinds, because there's a lot of studies that show the middle phalanx is slightly displaced in hind feet as a normal. But regardless, we want to have the PA puts the pedal bone into a situation where it's in good alignment with the other phalanges, okay? So that means the PA for each horse is very individual, as we can see here, okay? Because this horse has a 53-degree hoof angle, and he has a 50-degree bone angle. So the 53-degree hoof angle gives him a straight hoof pastern axis, but he has a 50-degree bone angle, so he only needs a 3-degree palmar angle to achieve alignment. Whereas this horse over here, he needs a 57-degree hoof angle to have a straight alignment. His bone angle is only 43 degrees. So he needs a 14-degree palmar angle in order to create this alignment, okay? You all with me? So again, palmar, plantar angle, the angle that the bone is sitting at is also very individual for the horse. But we know that negative palmar angles and very low palmar angles are predisposed again to injury, because the lower the palmar angle is, palmar angle is obviously also a product of what? The heel to toe height ratios, okay? So palmar angle is a result of heel to toe height ratios. And very low to negative palmar angles are again predisposing the horse to pathology. So palmar angle is something that's really important. And as we'll see later, because of this equation, we can actually monitor our horse's palmar angle or plantar angle from taking external photos. We don't need x-rays. Once we know the horse's bone angle, from then on, we can monitor its palmar or plantar angle. And now I think that's cool. Right. Okay, that thing's not meant to be there. So excuse me for that. Hang on, let me just get rid of that. Right. Okay, so now I mentioned earlier about the center of rotation. So here we can see the center of rotation, okay? This red dot here in this green circle. The center of rotation is the point at which the hoof rotates around, okay? It's an axis, so it's a pivot point for the hoof. So it's become a very important reference point in farriery for creating proportions around, okay? So when I say proportions, I mean the amount of toe compared to the amount of base of support behind. Okay, creating proportions around that point has become very important in farriery. And we can find the base proportions by certain mapping techniques. Okay, we can find the center of rotation, by various mapping techniques. So this red one is advocated by Dr. Mark Caldwell and finds the center of rotation on the sole of the foot. And this correlates with Duckett's bridge. So Dave Duckett came up with the bridge many, many years ago. And the Duckett's bridge is the widest point of the sole. This is also used by the ELPO as an important reference point, with also the end of the termination of the bars, all those. So this is the point at which the hoof rotates around. So creating proportions around that is very, very important. But when we put a shoe on the foot, it becomes difficult to locate these points. But you can see these points on here. You can see that this is the map center of rotation, which aligns with the center of rotation. Okay, but when we've got a shoe on, we can't see the bottom of the foot. So what we use this. This was shown by Jim Ferry in 2007. He showed that if you split the hairline into three, the first third from the toe, it shows you the position of the center of rotation. So it shows you where this is. So then we can make assessments of our shod hoof balance around the center of rotation from a lateral photo. Now, we can use HoofmApp to map the bottom of the foot. So these are two templates from HoofmApp, and they can be used to show our solar proportions around the center of rotation. Okay, so here you can see we've used the Dr. Caldwell template in HoofmApp here to find the center of rotation, and then we've placed the template, another template on top at the height of where the heels end and where the toe ends, and then you move this green and it shows you the proportions of that foot around center of rotation. So we've got 41% heel support, 59% toe length. Okay, and then here is with a shoe. Now, obviously, with a shoe, again, because we can't see the reference points, so when we look at these reference points from the mapping, this corner should be right at the end of the buttress where it joins the frog. Right at the end of the buttress where it joins the frog. And then at the toe, it should be at the inside of the white line. Now, you can't see those reference points under a shoe, right? So when you can use it on a shoe, because you can kind of guesstimate where they are, but it won't be as accurate as doing it on the bare foot, which is why we then use the lateral view to really properly assess shod proportions around the center of rotation. All right. So this is Jim Ferry's study. He showed if you take the hairline and you put it into three sections, into thirds, the intersection between the first and second third is where your center of rotation is. Okay. And then he also talked about this circle here, where the front of the circle will tell you where your extensor process is. The back of the circle tells you where your navicular bone is. Okay. And this point here is something that I've added, which is the point of balance. We'll talk about that later. And the point of balance is 1/4 of the way back. So it's 1/4 of the hairline. All right. But this is a picture from Jim Ferry's study showing how these points that we can map externally reference to internal anatomy. Okay. Now, when I created the HoofmApp template, which we can see here, okay, following this study, so you can see HoofmApp template follows the hairline, our green circle, front of the green circle tells us where our extensor process is, back of the green circle tells us where the navicular is, this small red notch shows us where the center of rotation is, this large red notch is the point of balance. I'll talk about the point of balance later, okay? But I wanted to make sure that this was actually accurate and this did find the center of rotation. So I actually published a paper in Forge Knowledge where we tested the template. I put it onto 23 different radiographs, and I measured how far away the red notch was from the actual center of rotation, the radiographic center of rotation, and found that there was statistical equivalence. So we know that this template accurately locates the center of rotation. Now, if it does that, then we know that if we map a foot on the outside from a lateral photograph, that the template is showing us this internal anatomy. So when we put on subsequent templates, such as this base proportions, we know that we're measuring around internal anatomy, which is what the point of it is, right? We need to create biomechanical efficiency around this center of rotation, because that's the point at which the hoof rotates around, right? But how can we see that externally? Well, we know our template maps it. So this template on the outside of the foot tells us where our center of rotation is, tells us where our extensor process is, tells us where our navicular bone is. So how cool is that? We don't need an X-ray to locate these positions. And then we can map the base proportions around that from an external view. Now, why is base proportions important? Okay. Base proportions, okay, if we're just talking about purely about how long this line is versus how long this line is, has very little impact on alignment, okay? Has very little impact on hoof pastern axis, okay? But that doesn't have much impact on that. Heel to toe height ratio impacts that, but not really how long your toe is or how long your heels are. That doesn't change that. So why is it important? Well, it's important because there's mathematical models showing that, we'll have questions at the end, but mathematical models showing that the more toe you have, the point of force trajectory, okay, so the longer your toe is, the point of force, so this is the where the ground reaction forces act through the limb, increases because it gets further and further away from the centers of rotation of the joints, okay? Right, so you don't really need to completely understand the physics of this. I've talked about the physics of this in other webinars, but the point is that the further away, the longer our toe is, yeah, the more collapsing force that is produced on the limb. And in order to counteract that collapsing force, the flexor structures, so the anatomy at the back of the foot, back of the limb, has to increase the strain to counteract the increase in that force, okay? So where's all that strain go? As I said before, that strain is transferred onto the navicular apparatus, on the deep digital flexor tendon, and onto the superficial digital flexor tendon, okay? So not only if we have poor alignment do we have increased strain in these, but if we have a long toe and poor proportions around the center of rotation, we also increase strain in those areas. So if you can imagine we have a long toe and a low heel, then we have the double effect on these structures. So we have to start measuring this stuff, okay? And also, the ground reaction forces affect how the hoof sinks onto soft ground. And we'll look at that more in more detail later for you, okay? Right. So, as I said, we've got the center of rotation. We've also got this point of balance, okay? This point of balance is important for biomechanics. Now, the reason the point of balance is important, now this might look really, really complicated, but I'm going to put it into easy terms for you, okay? If we shoot, the point of balance is the point at which the weight of the horse and the pull of the deep digital flexor tendon act, okay? So the forces acting on this foot from the horse and deep digital flexor tendon act at that point, okay? So the weight of the horse is being transferred through this point here, okay? Point of balance. The weight of the horse is transferred through that point by calculating the weight of the horse through the bone column plus the pull of the deep digital flexor tendon creates a load transferred through that point, right? That's the point of balance. So if we create 50-50 around the point of balance, then we have the equal amount of ground reaction forces on the back of the shoe, on the back half of the shoe, as the front half of the shoe. Okay, which means that on a soft surface, when the weight of the horse comes over that limb, the heels won't sink in, nor will the toe sink in. And why do we not want that to happen? Well, if we shoe around, if we have poor balance around the point of balance, we have a very long toe and a very short heel base of support, then all the ground reaction forces are concentrated on the heels, as you can see here. So if all the ground reaction forces are concentrated on the heels, then the heels sink in on a soft surface. If the heels sink in on a soft surface, I'm sure you can all guess what happens. We have a massive increase in strain on the tendons at the back of the foot. Okay, so we want our foot to maintain equilibrium, it's called, but maintain even plane on a soft surface, right? So that's why we want to create 50-50 around the point of balance. But we have to account, the reason we want to do that is because as the weight of the horse is coming over, we want the foot to remain aligned. Because if we are aligned, then we have even load share between the suspensory ligament, the superficial flexor, and the deep flexor. All those soft tissues are being loaded evenly. If the heels sink into the floor, then we have increased strain in the deep digital flexor tendon and the superficial flexor tendon, and a reduced strain on the suspensory. But that predisposes the flexor structures to injury. If the toe sinks in, right? So if we have too short a toe, this is important because people think you shorten the toe, that's good, so even shorter is even better. Well, that's not the case, because if we shorten the toe too much, then as the weight of the horse comes over, the toe sinks in to soft surfaces. If the toe sinks into the soft surface, then we reduce the strain on the deep flexor and the superficial flexor, and we increase strain on the suspensory ligament. So then we're going to predispose the suspensory ligament to injury. Right. Now, this is why we want to create balance around the point of balance. But we know that we have to account for the shoeing cycle, right? Because where I put the shoe on day one is not where the shoe is on day two, or week one, or week two, or week four, or even week 6, is it? Right? Because the hoof is growing. So the hoof, this dorsal this surface of the shoe, part of the shoe is always going to be moving forward from the point at day one. So what we end up doing is we end up with a zone. So you can see the green here. We end up with a zone of acceptable balance, acceptable 50-50 balance around, depending on the length of the shoeing cycle and depending on whether you're working on soft surfaces. So if you're working on soft surfaces, then really you want to have a short shoeing cycle and shoe towards the point of balance, 50-50 around the point of balance, to maintain a flat surface, a flat shoe on soft surface. You with me? However, if we have longer and longer shoeing cycles, then the point that we shoe around, the 50-50 that we create around, moves backwards and backwards towards the center of rotation. Because as we have hoof growth, the balance is going to move through this acceptable area, right? As we go through the shoeing cycle, we don't want the balance to be this side of the center of rotation. Otherwise, the toe sinks in. We don't want the balance to be this side of the point of balance. Otherwise, the heel sink in, right? So we need to create 50-50 around this region, depending on shoeing cycle length. Hopefully you're all with me on that. But also, this is a really, really good tool, therefore, because we can look at this externally. It's a really great communication tool between the farrier and the owner. Why? Because on day one, the farrier can take a photo and map the hoof, the base proportions around the point that he shot around. And then through the shoeing cycle, the client can take a photo and check how far forward of the point that the farrier shod around, how far forward everything's moved of that point. And if the balance starts to move beyond this point of balance, then the client goes, oh, we need to shorten the shoeing cycle because we're getting to a point where the heels are going to sink in every time. Right? So this builds a really, really good communication tool between the owner and the farrier. If they've both got HoofmApp, perfect. They can communicate with each other all the way through the cycle and make sure that the balance that the farrier was wanting to create is maintained. Now, the ability to create the proportions that you want around your point of balance or your center of rotation is directly affected by the alignment of the digit. Okay, as you can see here, right? So this foot on the left has a really nice straight phalangeal alignment, really nice straight hoof pastern axis. I think we would all agree. Therefore, it's very, very easy to create 50-50 around whatever point you want to create it around. It's easy because the center of rotation is in the right position, the pedal bone's in the right position. If we look over this side, we can see when we have a very broken back hoof pastern axis, we have a very broken back phalangeal alignment, the pedal bone moves this way, okay, moves clockwise in this case, or anti-clockwise if we were looking the other way, but moves dorsally around this axis. And this axis, the center of rotation, actually moves backwards and downwards within the hoof capsule. Okay, so the heel to toe height ratio, which we can measure, the heel to toe height ratio is poor, which is creating this broken back alignment. And this broken back alignment means it's now almost impossible to create the 50-50 proportions around either of these points practically. Because you can see here that even if we shoe this horse all the way back to the bulbs of the heel, we still can't create 50-50 around either of those points. What we would have to do is address the heel to toe height ratios to move this point upwards and forwards within the capsule, move the pedal bone back around this way, back in a caudal direction, which would mean that the base proportions all move backwards closer towards these points. Okay. All right. So you're with me. So if you're struggling, if your farrier is struggling to create the proportions around these points, you have to look at the phalangeal alignment. You have to look at your heel to toe height ratios. Because if you haven't got anywhere near alignment, then it's going to become increasingly more difficult to create the proportions that you want to create. Okay. Now, you'll also see on our coronet line template, you can see that there's an angle, right? So this angle is at 10 degrees. This angle is at 30 degrees, right? Now, this is a very, very important angle for you guys to monitor, okay? Why? Because that angle, the angle of this coronet, is also directly linked to the palmar angle or plantar angle. As you can see, we've got 10 degrees, we've got a nice palmar angle. We've got the pedal bone at a nice angle. We've got 30 degrees, and look, we're negative. This pedal bone's actually negative. Right. Now, there's studies now. This is my personal research, and this is research from a friend of mine. And Stewart, his name is John Stewart. He found that 90% of horses with a 30-degree coronet angle had negative palmar or plantar angles. 88% of them, 88% of horses with a 28-degree coronet angle had negative palmar or plantar angles. Right, so that tells us if we put this onto our horse, this template onto our horse, following the hairline, and I've got a video of exactly where to place it later for you. If we put this template on the hairline and our coronet angle is heading towards 27, 28 and upwards, then it's very, very likely that we need an X-ray to see whether we are negative, because we most probably are 80% likely to have a negative palmar angle. Okay, so this is where measuring your coronet angle is extremely useful and extremely important. Okay, and in my personal study, I found that all the horses, on average, the horses with negative plantar angles that were given to me had a coronet angle of 29 degrees, well, nearly 30 degrees, plus or minus 5 degrees. Okay. And the horses that had straight hoof past an axis had an average of 20, 22, 23, 20, around 23, 24 degree coronet angle. So straight away, we can see again, if we're heading towards 27, 28, 29, and certainly above, then it's highly recommended that we get X-rays to see what angle our pedal bone sat at. Right. So let's look at the templates that we have on HoofmApp and what each of them measure. Okay, so we've got our coronet template, which we've discussed in depth now, okay? And we've got our angle, our coronet angle as well. So we've seen the importance of those and what they tell us. This tells us our internal anatomy, and this is very much correlated with palmar or plantar angle. And then we have our base proportions, our base proportion template. Simply, you place the one notch at the end of the shoe, at the toe of the shoe, one notch at the heel of the shoe, and then this green one, you can move back and forwards. You line it up with your center of rotation or your point of balance or your zone within this zone here, depending on where you've decided to shoe around. And that will tell you the proportions around that point, right? So here you can see we've got 51% toe, 49% heel support around the center of rotation. So if we were to move that into closer into this zone, then we would easily have 50-50 depending on what area we wanted to move it around. Right. After then, we have our toe and heel angle template. So this is a red line with an angle template on one side, an angle on the other side, and then you can compare your heel and toe angle. You can also use the single angle line, which you can see in these images here. You can also use that to measure your toe angle if you want to. But this one just puts both of them onto the same template for you. And you can see we've got a 55-degree toe angle and a 26-degree heel angle, right? So if we look on this one, on D, we can see this is our heel to toe height ratio now. So we have another template, which is our heel to toe height ratio. So we can see here that we've got 2.06 heel heights to one toe height. Okay. Now you can see that the package we've put a shoe on with a wedge on. And you can see with like a very large difference between the toe angle and heel angle. Plus, if we had the template here, we can see a massive difference in heel to toe height ratio of this foot without the package on. Well, no wonder that foot was negative and had a very broken back hoof past an axis. We can see that here. Okay, so this is the foot before the shoeing. We can see that we had a 3.9 heel to toe height ratio, 3.9, so well above the maximum 3, almost 4. We had a 29-degree coronet angle. 29 degrees tells us almost immediately that this is a negative plantar angle. We have a negative plantar angle. And because that heel to toe height ratio is so large, well, obviously we end up with a broken back hoof past an axis. Okay, 56-degree past an angle, 46-degree hoof angle. Okay, because of our heel. So you can see as you start putting all the templates onto the foot, it starts telling you a story, doesn't it? And if we start and we look at the after job, we can see that our heel to toe height ratio went down from 3.92 to 2.09. So, well within our acceptable parameters. And obviously, we created the ideal for this particular horse in terms of heel to toe height ratio, because we ended up with a straight hoof past an axis, 53-degree pastern angle, 53 hoof angle. And we ended up with a 21-degree coronet angle. So straight away, we can see that we're going to have a positive plantar angle. We're most likely to have a positive plantar angle. And I've got the x-rays for this anyway, which is actually this x-ray here. So after the shoeing, we can see we had a nice positive plantar angle with the 21-degree coronet angle. Okay. So also we can use HoofmApp to mark up our radiographs as well. So we've got different templates now for marking up our radiographs. We have this, what we call bullseye template. If we place the bullseye template so that the circle follows the bottom articular surface of the bone, then that tells us that the middle of that circle is now the center of rotation of that joint. And we can do the same on this one, okay? So you can see, you can size the green circles. If you size it so that it follows the articular surface around the bottom like that, then that will accurately tell you where the center of rotation of that joint is, okay? And then we can obviously use our single angle line to measure plantar angle. This is obviously a hind foot, so it's plantar angle. We can measure our toe angle, and you can't really measure our heel. We've got a new template now, which I'll show you in a minute, which allows you to measure bone angle as well. I'll show you that in a minute. And then if we want to measure our base proportions on the radiograph, then we simply put our base proportions template on and put it up to that center of rotation of the distal interphalangeal joint, okay? So this is how we can mark up a radiograph, okay? And then we can see how broken back we are at each joint as well. Okay, so 56.2 take away 48.6 tells us how broken back this joint is. Okay, and with the new template, you could actually use that one to tell you that angle without having to subtract them from one another. All right, but we can use HoofmApp to mark up our radiographs really nicely and accurately, and it tells us the information that we want as farriers or owners. Right, now, I said before, we've got this new template it's called a vertex angle, or the angle between two lines. So this angle here, we can see this is actually a template now where we've got two angles, and you can move that around and it gives you that angle in there. So that angle in there is 40 degrees, and you can use the same template to measure your bone angle. Okay, so we use the same template there to measure this angle here, and that angle here is 49 degrees. And the plantar angle is -9. Now, what you'll see here is that 49 take away 9, because it's minus, 49 take away 9 equals 40. As I said before, your bone angle plus your plantar or palmar angle equals your hoof wall angle, right? So that means if we know that our bone angle is 49 degrees, your bone angle doesn't change unless you get demineralization of the bone. Your bone angle doesn't change. So that means if we know that hoof angle equals bone angle plus palmar or plantar angle, that means that our palmar or plantar angle equals our hoof angle, take away our bone angle, right? Because what that means is that once we know what our bone angle is, which is 49, from then on, all we have to do is measure our hoof angle to know where our plantar angle is, to know what angle our plantar angle is, right? How cool is that? So we can monitor our plantar angle just from measuring our external dorsal wall angle, right? Okay, and as you can see here, again, we've put the base proportions on this one, and you can see you've got 25% heel support to 75% toe support. Why are the proportions so bad? Because we've got such a broken back hoof pastern axis. We've got a lot of toe here as well, which needs to come off. We've got such a broken back hoof pastern axis that no matter how long we made this shoe, we would never get to 50-50 around this point. We need to realign the phalanges, okay, create at least a positive plantar angle, but more than a positive, to physically move this point upwards and forwards within the capsule and move the base back underneath the horse to enable us to achieve 50-50 around the center of rotation. Okay, so you can see quite nicely how much information HoofmApp can give you. You can watch this video over and over again. I'm going to put it up for everybody to watch as a recording as well. I've recorded this, so you can see we can see a massive amount. We can assess a massive amount about our hoof balance from our external templates, and then with our internal templates, we can also assess a lot radiographically. And then, really importantly, if we've had a radiograph, we can start to monitor internal anatomy from external measurements. So if that's not cool, then I don't know what is. But the importance of all of this is understanding that this talk hopefully gives a meaning to no hoof, no horse. Okay, because if your hoof balance is not right, your horse is going to be at massive risk of injuring those soft tissues, the tendons, the suspensory. But not only that, it's at risk of injuring all the way up it through its whole body. Okay, so if you're not measuring hoof balance, then you're missing one of the most important factors in your horse's working life and staying sound. Right, now I've got a little video here. Hopefully it plays for you, just to show you the process of taking the photos. Okay, now ideally, as I said, we want to take photos on a block as if we're taking a radiograph, okay, in the ideal world. However, if you get really proficient at taking photos in this situation, then it's obviously more practical, easier, quicker, and you're all more likely to do it. Now, I appreciate that putting feet on, getting horses to stand on blocks and stuff can be difficult, and it's probably why people don't document the feet. So I'm giving you an alternative which is subject to human error, but there's a process that if you get good at taking photos, you can be pretty accurate. So I'm and also on this video, you will also see just how easy it is to place the templates. All you do is move the ends around with your fingers. It's so easy. So I'm just going to play this video. Hopefully it'll play, and hopefully you'll see that. Can you hear me? Can you hear me in the video? No. Okay. So what I'm explaining here is the importance of having your camera, the horse is standing evenly on both limbs. Okay. Both limbs are evenly loaded. And the camera is placed on the floor with the lens on the bottom edge of your phone. Okay. Okay. The lens is on the bottom side on the floor so that you can focus on the bottom edge of the foot, about at least a meter away. Now, don't worry if the photo looks really small, because when you take the photo and you put it into HoofmApp, as you'll see here, okay, when you put the photo into HoofmApp, you'll see that it looks far away. But the reason we do it far away is to make sure that we have a minimum amount of parallax issues. Okay, so we're taking an accurate. We're going to get our angles and everything's going to be accurate, right? So I'm just going to rewind that touch. So you can see there how small the foot looks on the photo. But then we zoom in, okay, and you can see that foot now looks as if it's standing on a block, okay, because we're focused on the bottom edge of the foot, right? So you take the photo far away to make sure that you're focused on that bottom edge, and then you can zoom in HoofmApp, and then you have an accurate picture of your foot, okay? And then you simply add your template. So here you can see I'm going to add the center of rotation template. So when you're adding the templates, always make sure that the circle and the notches are towards the toe side. Okay. So if the foot's facing the other way, you've got to turn it all the way around. But all you do is you grab one end of the template with your finger and you position it right on the bottom of the hairline. So you can see here, this hairline curls all the way down. You have to follow the hairline to where the hairline stops, okay? Because if you just go to the back of the foot, that's not going to be accurate. You have to follow the hairline all the way down to the point at where the hairline then joins the bowl, okay? So you put one end all the way down there, and then the other end goes all the way. The other end, hang on. The other end gets put right where the hairline ends at the toe, okay? So that gives you your coronet angle. So obviously you can see that the coronet goes up and then curls down, okay? But this, to get your accurate coronet angle, you place the back right at the bottom of the hairline and the front right at the top of the toe where the hairline is, okay? And that gives you your accurate angle of the coronet angle. But you can see here how easy it is to move those templates around. You literally grab one side of your finger, move the template, position it. Once you know where you're positioning everything, it's really easy. So you can see you drag one end to the front of the toe, drag the other end to the back of the toe, and then simply slide the green to whatever balance points you want to balance around, right? So you can see how easy it is there to place your templates, yeah? Literally moving things around with your fingers. It's very, very user-friendly. So a lot of people have said that they couldn't understand the use of, how to move the templates around. Well, once you know where you need to position the templates, and we've got posts on HoofmApp, the HoofmApp page, explaining where they go and those kind of things. And we've got other videos as well explaining where to place them. And we've talked about it today as well. But you can see that all you have to do is with your finger, move it to one end, move it to the other end, slide that green thing around, and that's obviously for your base proportions there around your center of rotation, right? So I'm going to stop that there. Okay, so got lots of people's videos. I'm hoping that's not took up the gone onto the slides. Okay, so hopefully that was a pretty comprehensive look into using HoofmApp. I'm hoping that's helped some of you who didn't really know how to use it and how you were gonna use it and those kind of things. Let me know if let's have some questions. If you guys got any questions about anything, but I'm hoping that was pretty good explanation as to what everything's telling you and how to use it really. I'm just going to see what questions we've got here. So yes, Roxy, you're absolutely correct. In the case of laminitis, then all of the measurements that correlate with each other, go out the window. So thank you for pointing that out. That's a very good point. Once that bond's broken between the dorsal wall and the pedal bone, and we've got rotation, then the hoof angle and the bone angle no longer correlate with one another. So yes, thank you for pointing that out. So you asked me, do I have any guidance on which point the hairline angle becomes too low? Well, that's what I was talking about coronet angles, right? So if your coronet angle is starting to go above 27 degrees, then you're at risk of having a 0 to negative palmar or plantar angle, because we know that 90% of horses with a 30-degree coronet angle, so you called it the hairline angle, so the hairline angle is the coronet angle, okay? 90% of horses with a 30-degree hairline angle, as you've called it, or coronet angle, have negative palmar or plantar angles. Okay, 80% of horses with a 28-degree hairline angle or coronet angle have negative palmar angle. So yes, if you're starting to head towards those numbers, get an X-ray. Yeah.
I meant the other way around, actually. So
Oh,
if you've got wedges in and you're worried it's too much. Do you
oh.
have anything on
So
like it's gone too
so
far?
so for me, too far is if you've broken forward the hoof past an axis. Okay. So if you wedge a horse and now it's broken forward, yeah. So the hoof's at a steeper angle than the pastern, then you've gone too far. So you don't actually need a measurement for that really. It's just if well you do, you can measure the pastern angle and the hoof angle. If you've broken it forward, then you've gone too far. Does that answer that?
Yeah, thank you.
No worries. Um, you can't get a horse to stand still with vertical hind cannons. Not right. Yeah, it is. It is a massive frustration. Trust me, I've got to do that on for 200 horses for my PhD. So, but yeah, I completely understand that that can be very difficult. Now, having said that, um, that only matters if you're measuring hoof pastern axis. Okay, if you're measuring the hoof proportions, the coronet angle, the dorsal wall angle, the base proportions, heel to toe height ratio, that doesn't change if your horse is stood slightly camped under. That doesn't change. All right. So the only thing that it affects you measuring is hoof pastern axis because it will change the hoof pastern axis. So you can measure everything else, but ideally, yes, we want them to be standing vertically. So somebody's asked, how do I know for sure that the line you drop through the pastern axis is actually running down the center of those bones? So I mentioned that that line is parallel to. So let's bring up the. Let's bring this up again. Okay. Um, so if we, hopefully you can see that now, right? So if we go to here, uh, hang on, let's find one. It's fine. Let's use this one, right? So what I tend to do, because it seems to be this thing where everyone wants the pastern angle to be in the middle of the pastern, right? This guy's actually quite hairy, but if you hopefully you can see me do this, right? So if I insert a line, shapes, if I insert a line, if my line goes along, can you see how this part of the pastern here, okay, that part of the pastern is showing us our pastern angle. That's the bone. That is. This is the coronet. This is the coronet band going up, and this is hair and fluff. Okay, but in this bit here, we have our pastern angle. Right? Can you see that? So what you do then is you take that pastern angle and then you just move you use your HoofmApp on this angle and then just move it into the middle if you want to. But you can just measure. I don't know if you. Let me make that wider. Right. Here is our. Can you see how that's the pastern angle? Because it's that bit in the middle. That bit in the middle there, where we've got the skin resting directly on the bone. We can see that that is our pastern angle. Right. So we tend to move it into the middle because everyone tends to assess hoof pastern axis from a line through here. But really, you could just leave the angle line there, and then you could leave your other angle line there, couldn't you? And then you could assess hoof pastern axis along there. Um, but what we tend to do is we tend to take that angle. Now, the reason that's not so, can you see how this foot was um, domed, right? So when you take your hoof angle, you must take it from the top, right? You must take the top inch. Okay. So you can see there how we have that straight hoof pastern axis because that angle through there matches that angle of the top inch or so of the hoof, right? So that is what hoof pastern axis is about is measuring, right? So we put the measurements into the middle. Uh, we put the measurements into the middle like that. But really, you could just leave them there and there if you wanted, right? So hopefully that answers that question. Does that answer that question for you, Joe? So you can because you can move the templates, you can you can get the angle, and then if you can drag the template over into the middle, or you can leave it there. It's up to you.
Great,
That's
thank you. Yeah,
no
that's
problem.
great.
Yeah, no worries. Okay, are there any other questions? No. Okay, good. Well, obviously, you can always contact me through either the HoofmApp page or the Equine Documentalist page if you want to. If you ever have any more questions about using it, I've posted a couple of videos on the HoofmApp page now with more tutorials and stuff. So go and watch them if you want to. But really, I've tried to make it. I'm not very technical. I'm not very computer savvy. I've tried to make it easy for me to use. So if it's easy for me to use, it should be easy for you guys to use. And also I've got big fat farrier hands, and I'm not so it. I try to make it as user friendly as possible. But if you guys ever have any feedback, also please let me know. But thank you all for joining me today. I hope you enjoyed that. And as I say, any other questions, feel free to contact me. So bye, everybody.